Welcome to my Bob Thurman podcast. I'm so grateful some good friends enabled me to present them to you. If you enjoy them and find them useful, please think of becoming a member of Tibet House US to help preserve Tibetan culture. Tibet House is the Dalai Lama's cultural center in America. All best wishes. Have a great day.
This is episode 316, Understanding Tantra, Zen, and Vajrayana.
And the Buddha land, of course, is defined as a land where everyone lives for everyone else's liberation. And therefore everyone has everybody else going for their liberation, minus themselves. And therefore everybody is pretty hotly into liberation. So that's a messianic thing. But now, based on that, so just as that is based on that, the two elements, primary elements of the messianic Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, Bodhisattva Buddhism, are the realization of selflessness, that the self is empty of an intrinsically established self, that there is no element of myself that is isolated, intrinsically established, separated from relations with the rest of the universe, that is a sort of thing in itself, but everything about me is interconnected with everything else, and I am empty of any non-interconnected essence. So this insight, and not only that, but my habitual orientation to the world of being ego-driven, ego-centered, is based on the false assumption I have carried with me from beginningless time, known as ignorance or misknowledge, which has caused me to assume that there was a center in me that is the most important thing in the universe, which of course is an error. Right? So that selflessness is one of the aspects of universal Messianic Buddhism, as it is also of individualistic Buddhism. The insight into that selflessness being the true inner freedom that I can achieve. And the other aspect is the compassion towards all others, that they themselves should have all this same realization. That since there's nothing in me separated and away from all others, I'm interconnected with them totally. Therefore, their realization of that is their greatest release and their greatest happiness. And therefore, I should live, their liberation is my liberation in some sense. And that's called compassion. And then it is projected in the Messianic Buddhism, because in Messianic Buddhism, the historical orientation of coarse reality, what is known as gross or coarse reality, is left intact. And therefore, it will take me millions of lives to do that, of course, because there are millions, infinite numbers of beings. So in a way, it's an infinite horizon of positive evolutionary development for me and all beings, which I devote myself to with my Bodhisattva Messianic vow. Now, where the apocalyptic vehicle comes in, it doesn't change a single thing except one thing. By being a bodhisattva, by striving to liberate others, by opening myself also, my sensitivity to the degree to which others are suffering, and to the numbers of them who are suffering, thinking about them in the hells, thinking about them, my mothers, as it is said, my dearest relatives, all beings as my mother of this life, all beings as my only child, no being, even one frying in a hell, is sort of some alien who I don't know. They're all my blood relatives. In fact, in some life or another, every being has been my blood relation, cultivating this kind of vision, where if you cultivate it, you very easily begin to see, human beings especially easily, other species is more difficult, but you can easily realize the relatedness, the kinshipness of yourself and all beings. It's a very easy vision to see. And when you see that, and when you then think of them all as suffering horribly, as they say in Tibetan, all my old mothers, all my kind old mothers are frying in the hells, suffering in the animal form. Humphrey the beached whale is my mother, He's flopping around there, keeps trying to swim into San Francisco. He's actually my mother, you see. Then what happens is you begin to get a little crazed. The Bodhisattva becomes a little bit impatient. While patient to endure injuries inflicted upon him or herself, in order to develop patience, to develop the Buddha quality of patience. which relates to the Buddha qualities of beauty and imperturbability and steadiness and calm. Patience is developed. Beauty is, any beauty you have in this life, it is said, comes from your patience in former life. Any ugliness you have in this life comes from your anger in former life, it is said. It's a very nice one. I like that one. Beauty elixir is patience. And so you get a little bit crazed, and when you get a little bit crazed, then you say, well, what is this about 3 incalculable aeons of lifetimes before I can really help these beings? I can't take that. There must be a better way. There must be a better vehicle. There must be something to accelerate this process. I can't stand sitting here and piously saying, I'll be a bodhisattva and I'll do all these good things for 3 incalculable aeons of lifetimes. That's like, that expression means something like, if you ever remember the movie that Carl Sagan did on the cosmos, that cosmic calendar where he walks up billions of years, up into the human species, the Earth first, from there, sort of Western materialist notion of evolution, and he walks up on 30 days, and the human life form is down here in the last 2 minutes of the 30th day or some kind of thing. It's a thing like that. 3 incalculable aeons is 3 progressions up from Precambrian slime to humanity for an individual. Not for a species, but for one person, through billions of life forms. So it's a long time. And during that time, your mothers, you're unhappy if your mother or your only child or whoever is most dear to you, suffers for an hour, they fall down, break their knee, and they have to lie there, and you come home late, and then they've been lying there in agony for an hour, and you're really unhappy about it. But yet the Bodhisattva is in the situation of where, having felt this connected to all beings, cultivating a sense of connectedness, not allowing to be walled off by saying, that's not my relative, that's not my problem, you're not my family, etc. They can't say, well, it's all coming in due time in history, the sort of conventional wisdom idea. They say, no, I insist it must come now. I must change causality. I must change relativity. Somehow, I'm going to go nuts and do it now. And such a person, in fact, would go nuts and not do it now. But lucky for him or her, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas elaborated the tantric vehicle, the apocalyptic vehicle. Apocalypse in the sense of putting an end to the course flow of time, challenging the equation of time right away, and giving one the capability of, in fact, attaining Buddhahood, not just arhatship, but Buddhahood. All magical, all competent, I don't say all powerful, it smacks too much of monotheism, but all competent, all responsive Buddhahood in this one life. Not that it's easy, but it's called easy, and when it's called the easy path, you might run into it advertised as the easy path. You might think it was the Friday night talk as opposed to the weekend seminar at the Open Center. But it does not mean that kind of easy path. It means easy path in that you can compress into one lifetime the evolution it would take you millions of lifetimes to accomplish by this high technology. And but that means, imagine how that's then very hard. That's much harder than living a normal sort of lifetime of just sort of going with the flow. That's intensely hard. To put in millions of lifetimes, millions of death times into one life is no laughing matter. But that is what the Vajrayana, that's what the apocalyptic vehicle means. Now, how does the apocalyptic vehicle work? Now, first of all, in the apocalyptic vehicle is not also only available in the tantras. There's an expression that the Tibetans use, which they get from India, from the last phase of Indian Buddhism, which is called the integration of sutra and tantra, or the integration of ordinary Mahayana and esoteric Mahayana. These two things as being integrated. And the way people usually understand that is, even Tibetans, and I often debate with Tibetans about this, and I've had some really amusing and hot debates, but the way it's usually understood is that the Vajrayana or Tantrayana is so fantastic and so great that it embeds within itself all of the positive aspects of the Hinayana and the Mahayana, of the individual vehicle and the universal vehicle, so that you can sort of just do the Vajrayana, if you're smart type of thing. So that, because it's integrated in that sense that it incorporates sutras, system. And they resist very much the idea that integration cannot be one way. If tantras are integrated with sutras, if sutras are integrated with tantras, tantras are also integrated with sutras. And in fact, The sutra contains, for one who knows how to see it there, all the method of the Tantra. So Mahayana is not withholding, in other words, the vision of Tantra. When in the Vimalakirti transforms the universe, when he transforms people to being 40,000 leagues tall and enthrones them in lion thrones and tells them about the inconceivable liberation. When he feeds them a magical feast with grains of rice from the incense universe, and they become smell a certain way, right? And the smell doesn't go away until they've achieved another stage of enlightenment. He feeds them this sort of magical feast, this elixir of enlightenment in a certain way, in a ritual way, you see. This is Tantra. This is really kind of initiatory, in fact. Both of these elements are very initiatory. And most importantly, the goal vehicle orientation, and this is the first thing I want to say about what Tantra is. There are four things, in my view, of what Tantra means. And the goal vehicle orientation is, rather than what is called the cause vehicle orientation, this is the first criteria of Tantra, and this exists in the sutras. And in this context, sutra refers to the exoteric part of the Mahayana, which itself, as I said, incorporates the Hinayana. So in a way, all of exoteric practice of Buddhism can be called, in this context, Sutrayana, or Sutra vehicle. It's a way of expressing it, and it means based on kind of the scriptures. Tantrayana is based on the Tantras. Now, the Tantras are also, which are esoteric, but they are also scriptures. Strangely, they're also texts, and they have a vast literature. Again, people might wrongly think, well, Tantra means only practice, and Sutra means sort of literature, but this is wrong. Tantra has a huge literature, involves an even huger, practically, study than the sutras. But what Tantra basically, people say, traditionally, it means a continuum, Tantra does. And another gloss, which the Tibetans will always say, and then the Sanskrit tradition gives the etymology from Sanskrit of Tantra of weaving. The verb tantrayati means to weave. So the idea of sort of creating something, Tantra is. And the weaving sense is nicely captured by what Tartuku used to say, is that, in a way, the process of achieving wisdom, in a way, takes apart the world of ignorance. Through critical wisdom, it sort of pulls to pieces and liberates into emptiness, in a way, the whole fabric of the constructed world of ignorance. And you break free of it, in a way. You sort of destroy the world of ignorance, actually. But does that mean you have destroyed everything and you live in a void? No. Then, based on the wisdom of selflessness, you create a new world. You build a world of wisdom, in other words, out of wisdom. And the way of building, the methodology of building a new world out of wisdom is what is called Tantra. It is the weaving of a world out of wisdom, out of pure wisdom, having destroyed the world that had been made involuntarily out of ignorance. That's another good way. That's a good way of a sort of a general definition of Tantra. But no, I define Tantra as basically involving 4 points. And I have rather technically phrased them here. I actually brought it in writing today. I rather technically phrased them, because it's good to have a technical thing. It's challenging. It's the establishment of a goal vehicle orientation on the foundation of a clear inference of selflessness and the concomitant strong motivation of universal compassion through entering the relationship with the Vajra Guru and receiving the consecration. The key reorientation here being the articulation of compassion's passive, sensitive mode of anguish into an active, loving, universal bliss. That's technical. What that means now, means vehicle orientation or cause vehicle orientation means the following. In all of Sutra practice, but not quite all, because Sutra also has goal vehicle. That's why the boundaries are not as neat as one would think. But in most practices, one should and does begin with the notion that I am ignorant. I am in the samsara, I am deluded, I have been doing all these bad habits, and I've been indulging all these confused ideas, and I have to now correct all of that. And I have to replace my ignorance with wisdom, and I can replace my greed with generosity and detachment, replace my anger with love and tolerance and patience. And so one works sort of in an antidotal mode, sort of against the place where one is, And in that sense, what one does is the cause of coming into a new mode. It's a means vehicle. One is practicing the means of achieving enlightenment. One is leaving intact initially the concept that one is here in the state of samsara and one has to go there to nirvana or Buddhahood. And there's a path through which one must go. You see, and that's called a means, in this context, that is called a means vehicle or a goal vehicle orientation. Now, or a cause vehicle orientation. Now, the goal vehicle orientation is different. It's more radical. It questions, in questioning one's knowledge and in accepting one's ignorance in a way, it accepts it so strongly that it questions even one's perception of oneself as being apart from enlightenment. It questions that there is a cause and an effect, a means and a goal. It radically sort of leaps away from one's own judgment, dismissing that as ignorance, and adopts the judgment of Buddha. And remember, the judgment of Buddha is when his toe is on the ground, as in the Vimalakirti, and he has revealed the world as he sees it, which is a perfection, a place of total perfection, where all of time is transcended, and although beings don't themselves feel perfect, and in that sense, from their point of view, are not perfect and have an evolution to go through, by seeing all of their future moments simultaneous with their present one, he sees their potential as actual in a way, and therefore sees it as perfect. Right? So, the goal vehicle orientation says, well, Buddha sees my perfection. I accept that I have perfection then, and I put the tension between, I immediately therefore enter into the tension between what I know by inference to be my reality, because after all, my reality as revealed by wisdom is more real than my reality as revealed by ignorance. If ignorance is ignorant, then that's false reality. And I am, in fact, indivisible from the Buddha state even now. And, the whole concept of consecration in Tantra, you go and take initiation. What initiation means is that through an act of such imagination, one adopts the imaginative stance of being present at the goal. You're initiated into green Tara, then you adopt the ability, you receive the license in a way to visualize yourself as green Tara. But that doesn't mean, and this is often understood, and people place too much emphasis on the initiation. They think, it's the big thing is the initiation. I knew somebody who's, shall be unmentioned, unnamed, who for years I used to meet at a lot of different initiations. And once they, by accident, came into a class of mine, and we were discussing the meaning of all these things, and this person actually interrupted me in public and was so shocked and said, "You mean it isn't just the initiation? That's not all? You mean that wasn't enough? All those initiations I did? That didn't settle the matter? I have to do something else?" They were so freaked out, When they realized that initiation is nothing but the doorway, the permission, it's like getting a driver's license. It's not even buying the car, or turning the ignition, putting foot on the pedal. Initiation is getting the license to go, the learner's permit to go and drive the car. And this person had been collecting all these learner's permits, never got in the car all those years. Poor thing. She didn't agree with me, of course, because I'm not a lama, so she stormed out. He stormed out, I should. He stormed out. In a huff. Never came back. He's living now in the temple of learner's permits. So that the initiation is wrongly thought to be, that this act of imagination is it, and if some authority tells you you're a Buddha or you're Green Tara, then you are Green Tara. And that's ridiculous. That's totally wrong. If you think that, you shouldn't be doing initiation. You don't have that preliminary understanding that is an absolute prerequisite to practicing Tantra. You cannot practice Tantra if you do not understand what you are doing. It's like getting in a rocket shot to the moon. You don't know which any of the levers are. It's dangerous. It's not because somebody's withholding it because they want to hire more money or something, or you didn't do this or pay your dues. It's because it's dangerous to you. Tantra is there to be, Buddhas are there, and Bodhisattvas are there to share, and Lamas to share the Tantra widely if they help people, but they're dangerous. That's why they have them esoteric. And I will explain to you how they're dangerous. Don't get superstitious. Don't get upset. I'll explain to you. You can understand easily, precisely why they are dangerous. So the active imagination is only getting, then one knows full well, of course, you've been in this initiation, you've decided to be goal vehicle, you can't stand to wait for lifetimes and lifetimes to be able to help other beings, you're becoming you're taking the mad bodhisattva's way, the wild bodhisattva way, and so you're going and got initiation, and you know damn well that you're not Green Tara, and you're not Buddha Vajrapani, and you're not Demchok, or whatever it is. You know that. You just went and got initiation somewhere, mumbo jumbo, blah, blah, blah. Didn't even know the language, mouthed some words in Tibetan, you don't know what it means. Very solemnly, you go, you don't even know what you're saying. So it's just a magical sort of hologram. You've had a moment of sharing the hologram of the vision of the teacher, if it's a genuinely qualified teacher, who sees you as potentially enlightened. But you're clear that you don't still see yourself that way. But the procedure that you adopt is a procedure of questioning your assumption of unenlightenment from the beginning. So that, in a way, you ritually or imaginatively accept yourself in the state of enlightenment, and then your job is to remove what prevents you from experiencing that. Remove the fact that you don't experience it. Not kidding yourself that just by imaginatively doing it or accepting the word of an authority or a ritual confirmation of some kind, not pretending that has actually changed your feeling, but using that as a tension against your feeling, you see. That's what makes it kind of powerful. And in this sense, Zen is totally Tantra. It's hidden, invisible Tantra, because real Tantra couldn't work in East Asia, really. It was not acceptable in East Asia. And the reason real Tantra was not acceptable in East Asia, except in a tiny little hidden stream, which is there, and it's in Shingon in Japan. It was actually more acceptable in Japan than in China. China was really unable to deal with Tantra, basically. It was sort of hidden just in a couple of places in China. Because in Tantra there's a lot of female symbolism. Because enlightenment is personified in a female way in Tantra quite a lot. And then there are these unbelievable things of Buddhas as yabyums, male and mother and father and consort. So the Chinese freaked out on this one, and they couldn't deal with it. Because the Chinese oppression of their women was much too intense compared to India. And therefore just didn't go in China, period. A little trickled into Japan, then they did better in Japan, actually, because they're not quite as bad. They weren't, in the early period, particularly quite as bad in Japan. Remember, Japan is land of Lady Murasaki, Used to be land of Lady Murasaki before the shoguns got there and locked them all up, Locked up Lady Murasaki. So that's the first thing, is this goal orientation. Oh yes, and Zen, I want to come back to Zen, because we should say something, but this is really elementary to people. A lot of people have toyed with Zen, worry about Zen, and this and that about Zen. And so we should talk about Zen. Zen is, in fact, therefore, since it couldn't explicitly come into East Asia, because women were, the idea of women's spirituality was too frightening to the Orthodox culture in East Asia. Not that there wasn't an underground culture, but the Orthodox culture was too frightening. And so Zen really is the Tantric tradition in Asia, in a way, in East Asia. And Zen, without mentioning initiation and without mentioning a lot of these things, has the basic collision, and it has the basic goal vehicle orientation, and has a lot of the basic aspects of Tantra. For example, when the Roshi, in the famous story about Mazi and Baizhang, where Baizhang was meditating in the snow and wind and rain and everything, year after year, month after month, like really riveted in there in this heavy samadhi in this like roofless temple up in a mountain, eating no food and like machoing it up. He was meditating away, like waiting for the universe to transform and himself to disappear into the void or wherever he thought he was going. His master Mazi used to come and sit next to him, sort of hang out like the old Cracker Barrel type, and sit there and would pick up a shard from the broken up down grounds of the temple and rub the shard very seriously. And he went on for months like this, rubbing the shard and really like scientifically rubbing it and energetically rubbing it and professionally wearing out cloths rubbing it and rubbing it with grass and rubbing it with moss and spitting on it and rubbing it and doing all this stuff with this shard, And then put it down carefully and come back the next day when Baizhang was in his meditation session and come back and go back to rubbing, And of course Baizhang was saying, this idiot guru of mine, because Zen are into radical anti-authoritarianism as a total antidote to this super-authoritarian Chinese culture and family structure. And so he was saying, this moron is doing this thing, and I'm not going to pay any attention. I'm going to show him. And he was like this, you know. Finally, after like 6 months of rubbing the shard, you know, scratch, 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 this guy's going like indefatigably, his guru. He finally did get sick of it, and at one point during a break in his meditation, he said, excuse me, but you have really been carrying on with this shard for quite a long time. And, you know, I wouldn't have disturbed my meditation to discuss this with you, but, I mean, it's so lunatic, it's so foolish. If some other monk saw you, they'd think you'd really crack from the strain. Well, what do you think you're doing? Type of thing. And the guy looked very offended, Mazu did. He looked like truly hurt. And he said, why? He said, I'm making a mirror, he said. And the guy said, you can't make a mirror out of a shard. You can polish it until you're dead, and you'll never be a mirror, he said. And Mazu said, and you can't make a Buddha by meditating. And apparently then he did achieve a very good satori at that time. Because he was being criticized. What was it? It was this powerful symbolic criticism of his means-end practice. He was making a big effort to meditate, to break through to a state away from him, apart from him, that he was assuming was apart from himself, you see. To get to the goal, Buddhahood, rather than proceeding in the context of being in the goal, you see, and not allowing any interference between himself and the goal to take place. That is how, in fact, one should be meditating. That is, as Dogen said, for example, one must sit while casting off body and mind, as Jivalkirti said, you know. You can't sit thinking that I'm now meditating, I'm going to get to something. In true Zen, you cannot. That's not casting off body and mind. Casting off body and mind means being beyond the egocentrically appropriated body and mind. That means being in the state of Dharmakaya. And that's the only way to meditate, is be in the goal state, that means. Therefore, for example, the famous phrase, just sitting, of Dogen's, doesn't mean meditating. It's completely doesn't. People go say sitting meditation, but actually that's a misnomer. That's a very bad teaching. Because just sitting meant, just by sitting you were Buddha. That's what Dogen said. He said, nobody's getting to be Buddha. You sit, you adopt the Buddha posture, you are Buddha. But that is tantric in the sense that that is a radical forcing of the imaginative shift from not being Buddha to being Buddha. And then dealing with the discrepancy between where one is positing oneself as really being on the basis of faith in the Roshi, faith in the tradition, faith in the patriarchs in the case of Zen, or faith in the Vajra Guru in the case of Tantra, as opposed to having the normally misplaced faith in one's own distorted and deluded vision. You follow me? I think it's clear. But it's funny, isn't it? People say, I'm going to go do some sitting meditation. Ha ha. Dogen would kick them. He would freak out. You can't do sitting meditation. If you really sit, you can only be Buddha, which is being in the center of a kind of invisible mandala in East Asia. And there's more. And then the relationship, therefore, with the Guru is all-powerful in that context. Just as in the Tantra, the relationship with the Vajra Guru is all-powerful. You cannot receive a Tantric initiation unless the Guru is perceived by you as a total Buddha. Not just, but a real total Buddha. Now that doesn't mean, this is very sophisticated, that doesn't mean the Guru has to be a total Buddha. The Guru could be a shmo. Although if the Guru was a shmo, he or she, it would make it very hard for you to visualize them as a total Buddha, because they'd keep shmoing out and distracting you. That's why Tibetans have a proverb, the best Vajra Guru is one who lives 3 valleys away, at least. So you see them when they come out all dressed up and all ornaments in the mandala, and you don't see them in the daily shmoingness, shmoing over to the outhouse and so on. You don't get familiarity, it doesn't get a chance to breed contempt, you see. And so anyway, that's one of the things. So the goal vehicle orientation. Now I say in here that, you see, through entering the relationship, that the key reorientation being the articulation of compassion's passive, sensitive mode of anguish into active, loving, universal bliss. And that's very important, because in the Sutrayana, the pair that is taken causally to lead to the fruition in Buddhahood is the pair of wisdom and compassion. Wisdom corresponds to ultimate reality, compassion to relative reality. Wisdom gives issue in the body of truth, of Buddhahood, the Dharmakaya. Compassion gives issue in the body of form, all the emanation bodies and the beatific bodies of a Buddha. And compassion fulfills the aims of others, and wisdom fulfills one's own aim and one's own need. And so that's the pair. Wisdom and compassion indivisible is the methodology of Sutrayana. Now what compassion is, remember, basically, is sensitivity to the suffering of others and willing that they become free of that suffering. Right? Now again, if that's pushed, if you push that will to another's being free of suffering, what is that actually? If you push it. It is, of course, a will to their happiness, which in Buddhism is called love. And a will to their happiness, if you push that, and you keep willing that someone is happy, you keep willing that someone is happy, is it effective to sit there agonizingly willing that they be happy? Did you ever have some person, totally miserable person, saying, be happy, be happy, be happy to you? Did it help much? It made you more tense. So when that will to others' happiness intensifies and intensifies, it becomes, when you finally, it dawns on you, your wisdom is such that it dawns on you that, well, if I really want them to be happy, how do I make them happy? Then you realize that the only way that I can really effectively make them happy is to be happy myself. Only from an overflow of my own happiness can I effectively make them happy. Could you ever make anybody happy when you were not happy? It was an overflow of your happiness that made another happy. When you are happy, you easily make other people happy, right? It's spontaneously, you crack a joke, do this, do that. You sort of know, you have a different kind of relation like that. So to expand that to extreme case like the Buddhahood, a Buddha, therefore, is an engine of happiness. A Buddha's compassion, therefore, has become more practically motorized to become an energy of universal bliss. So for the Tantra, the cultivation is not, it's still wisdom, compassion, indivisible, but compassion now has been more energized to become great bliss. It is bliss, wisdom, indivisible. It is bliss void, indivisible, it is called in the Tantra. It is the subjectivity of bliss that, in fact, is what the lineage of compassion continues in. So that's a very key reorientation. Very, very important in Tantra. Is getting at bliss. It's a more powerful energy, and it's essential in the case of the imagination. Imagination won't work well under agony, but under bliss it will. That is why, for example, in the Vimalakirti, a non-tantric document, but in the tantric initiation, in a way, into the inconceivable liberation in the Vimalakirti that you read, he sat people up on 30,000-mile-high chairs. He made them feel majestic and magnificent and huge and vast and confident and royal. Because from that position of sort of a royal confidence and majesty and glory, then they could begin to conceive of the planet in a mustard seed, of accomplishing all beings' aims and magic and creativity and beauty, which is the vehicle, the bliss. Bliss means beauty. Bliss means the art of actually creating the beauty that actually makes other beings happy, of the beauty that is liberating to them, the beauty that opens doorways to liberation. So that's the first reorientation. The second is called, then once you're in that goal vehicle orientation, and once you're under that pressure, you see, when you understand initiation, again, you realize, for example, the great master Atisha, the great Bengali master, who was the greatest benefactor the second great benefactor of Tibet from the Buddhist history point of view, Padmasambhava being the first, Atisha being the second, who came 300 or 400 years later. He said, when I became a monk, I was the best practitioner of my vows. I had excellent discipline. I have almost rarely had any kind of infraction, and I immediately repaired it when I did, and I was really strong in my ethical practice. When I then took the Mahayana Bodhisattva vows, I began to get a bit shoddy, and I began to lose them a lot and then have to repair, and it was very difficult, much more difficult. Some of the Tibetan lamas who are more courageous and critical, and therefore will be critical with Western people, are funny. They laugh about how Western people always want to come and take Bodhisattva vows. And then he says, well, how about a little monk's vow? Oh, no, not that. And in fact, it's much easier to be a monk or a nun than to be a Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva vow is incredibly difficult. Imagine taking the vow to save all beings. That means you can never dismiss any being that you ever relate to. Even a cockroach, even a spider, poisonous snake. You can never, or much less a nasty person who you really dislike. You can never dismiss even Hitler, Stalin. You can never dismiss the most evil being, Jack the Ripper. I once had a student reading Vimalakirti. We came up against that. Lost his family in Auschwitz. No way, I will not take a vow to see to it that whatever piddling reincarnation Hitler is now experiencing is going to move on to Buddhahood. And I'll see to it that it does. I'll never take such a vow. This guy marched out, drove 700 miles away from my class. This one guy switched to different religion. Sorry, Bodhisattva vow has this magnificent scope and uncompromising attitude of universality of its love and compassion. No exception. You break the Bodhisattva vow, which is very bad for you if you've taken it. Better never to take it. You break it if you get so mad with anybody ever subsequently that you say, that one, no nirvana. I cut off my care for that one. That doesn't mean that you couldn't kick somebody in the behind, but you have to do it wanting them to attain Buddhahood. I give you this kick now. In the future, I will kick you through the door to Buddhahood. You have to remember that. Not to do it with totally destructive wrath, in other words. And then on top of that, the Vajrayana vow is so much more difficult. Because in the Vajrayana vow, one is to take a vow to transform, control, transmute even more subtle areas of the mind. Again, people say Vajrayana is the easy way, there couldn't have a difficult vow. No, it has a much more difficult vow. The Vajrayana vow is really binding the unconscious. Mahayana vow is binding the surface emotions I'll never hate and so forth. The Bodhisattva vow. And I'll have this incredible, tireless energy, Bodhisattva vow. But Vajrayana vow, Tantric vow, is binding the unconscious. I'll see to it that my unconscious is transformed in a certain way. It can be infracted by the unconscious, by the instincts going in what might be thought of as a normal way. Then the Vajrayana vow is changing the instincts. It was more difficult. So Atisha said, once I took the Tantric vows, I really was up a creek. The great master, Atisha. So the second step is what is called the imaginative purification of the ordinariness of perception through systematic visualization of emptiness/relativity as exquisite aesthetic perfection. And now this is what is called the creation stage, at least in certain tantras, and it is in whatever it's called, it is the creation stage. It is the practices of visualization, of the mobilizing of the imagination, of imagining the wisdom of emptiness in the form of buildings, in the form of a different body, in the form of chakra systems, in the form of deities and a divine universe and so forth, seeing this house as a diamond palace rather than a brick place and so forth, seeing the city as a pure land, etc. An incredible task and enterprise, which is what all that making of all those powder mandalas is about. The powder mandala thing is a trigger to the imagination, to empower the imagination to really re-envision the whole world that way, through your own. I mean, it's nothing but a beginning, a template. The real mandala is what you learn to visualize in your mind, which glows and glistens in your own mind. The real medium of the mandala is the vision of your mind, of pure jewel environment that you envision. And it's considered, once you have visioned that, once you learn that, it is said that, the powder mandala, painting of a mandala, the most expensive, most fantastic 13th century artwork, whatever it may be, is considered shoddy. Tibetan masters don't care about tankas and things. I don't know if you ever noticed. Oh yeah, that's nice tanka. Oh yeah, they make their mandala, then they sweep it away and all this. That's because they have actually practiced visualizing, and if you enter into the imagination realm, the hologram, the holographic mandala that is there in your vision, it's much more beautiful. No, nothing made of earthly substances of any sort can possibly convey it. It's truly a shining, brilliant, magnificent thing. And it's not just that the human being can innately do it. That's also true. Human beings can innately visualize magnificent things. And if they develop ability of one-pointedness, they can do it even better. As they say, they can paint with the fine brush of samadhi on the jeweled wall of the calm, unruffled mind. They have these wonderful expressions. Make a fresco, like making frescoes, in the mind, In entering and through the initiation into the tradition of thousands of years of cultivated imaginations, is this mind-to-mind hologram, So that there is the mandala existing there in the mind space in some way, you see. It's existing there in the Buddha mind now, you see. So then one enters into it. So that when one goes, although it's in a mental thing of one's own imagination, when one does it through the connection to the tradition, then that one's own imagination becomes a kind of vessel for the one of the Buddha's imagination, which is still made of imagination stuff. Divine jewels, heavenly jewels, which can be, in heaven, they can have because heaven is like something like, the heart of a red star, or heart of a sort of a new galaxy or something like that. It's like just pure energy, pure jewel energy. So you can just, with your imagination, you can just go into this giant vat, infinite vat of pure energy, and just shape a beam of diamond 46 yards long, and shaped and frescoed with dragons and crocodile snouts and pearls hanging from it, and then just fit that on the framework of the ruby plinth, and then top of the emerald pillar, etc. But it's not encrusted with diamonds like a piece of plaster or wood. It's just solid, liquid, crystallized, warm, pulsing, vibrated, self-luminous diamond that's there from heaven in heavens. The gods have also such materials, they say. They have such a lumberyard in the Tushita heaven and in the various Paranirmita Vashavarta, in the other heavens of the desire, and especially the form realm. So the second aspect of Tantra is this imaginative purification of the ordinariness of perception through the systematic visualization of emptiness relativity as exquisite perfection. And of course the key there is emptiness relativity, that prerequisite to this, entering into this goal vehicle, it must be an initial inference of selflessness. Anyone who considers that they can be initiated into the Tantra without having the clear inferential understanding of selflessness, plus the Bodhisattva motivation, it is incorrect. It is a mistake of teacher and student to enter into the Tantric practice. And the inferential, you all understand inferential realization of selflessness, I'm sure, by now, clearly. You better, or I will feel really disappointed. It's very simple. All things are purely relative. Therefore, I am empty of any non-relative essence. That's just so clear. That's really easy, isn't it? It's like inferential, clear. Everything is relative, then therefore there are relative things, a relative nexus of things cannot contain a non-relative thing. Is that difficult? Is it? Does anybody not understand that? That means anytime I'm feeling sort of absolute, like I'm rising up out of the world, because I'm in such a towering fury, or such an overwhelming lust, or such a magnificent arrogance, or such a fantastic, intense envy, or such a total confusion, that I'm somehow withdrawing into some sort of total towering isolation. Although I can feel that way, I know by inference, by clear reasoning, that that's impossible, that I really am this isolated thing that I'm beginning to feel like. Because I wouldn't feel it. If I am feeling it, it's relating to me. To me being maybe my solar plexus, or my nerves, or the words in my brain, or the synapses, or the neurons. And that if those things are feeling it, then they are related to the atoms in the air, and the water, and the moisture in the air, and the ground, and the gravity, and the electricity. And it's all interconnected. It's a buzzing, blooming bunch of quarks. Because I'm feeling that way, it cannot be such an isolated, essential, intrinsically real, unempty self, right? So that is the power of the inference. If I'm in such a terror, for example, I'm dying, and the whole world is closing in on me, and I'm gasping for air, and I'm choking and freaking out, and it's like there's this me, and then everything else is crashing down. I can recognize that this feeling of being sort of an isolated, hunted essence that is maybe going to lose its hold can be controlled by the reasoning that if something is like a rat being caged inside my solar plexus trying to get out, trying to escape being crushed by collapsing walls, then I'm feeling that. If I'm feeling that, it is not isolated, it is not alienated, it is part of the process. It is a relative thing. I can't be really dying as an I that was different and separated, because I must be a relative thing. I am therefore death is me too.
Bob Thurman podcast is produced through a Creative Commons No Derivatives license. Please be sure to like, share, and repost on your favorite social media platforms. And is brought to you in part through the generous support of the Tibet House US Menla membership community and listeners like you. To learn more about the benefits of Tibet House membership, please visit our websites at thus.org, menla.org, and bobthurman.com. Tashi Delek, and thanks for tuning in.